The next day, I usually wake up in some strange place with a kid with an accent playing with my feet.
Over his 30-year reign as the king of late-night television, Johnny Carson hosted thousands of guests. Most were there to plug a movie, sell a book, or promote an album. But then, there was a rare breed of guest that stood apart from the rest. These were the select few who could make Johnny laugh so hard he'd lose his composure. They were the ones who made him lean back, wipe tears from his eyes, and watch the chaos unfold just like a fan. Today, we're looking at the definitive list of the 15 funniest guests to ever grace Johnny Carson's stage. Number 1, Robin Williams, the uncontrollable genius. When Robin appeared, it wasn't just an interview, it was a high-speed performance piece. He would instantly shift into improvised characters, using a frantic physical energy that left Johnny gasping for air. 1 second he was a Shakespearean actor, the next a Southern grandma, firing off jokes faster than the audience could even process them.
If you think about Shakespeare, you think about a man basically with the education, second-grade education, wrote some of the greatest poetry of all times. I think maybe not. I don't know. Wandering around Stratford after a couple of beers, knocking on doors, going, is this to be or not to be? Right! Oh, yeah. I wrote that! That's mine! That's mine! I'm William Shakespeare, right? Kiss my tights!
Johnny would often just surrender control, leaning back in his chair to let Robin run wild. You could see the transition clearly. Carson stopped being the host and became a spectator in his own show. For Williams, the desk was a stage and every object a prop. He'd turn a coffee mug into a puppet or a microphone into a golf club. He turned the set into his playground, and Johnny absolutely loved every second of the madness. Number 2, Don Rickles, the undisputed king of insults. When Don Rickles walked onto the set, he didn't just act like a guest, he acted like he owned the building. He roasted Johnny to his face, mocked the band, and went after anyone unlucky enough to make eye contact. His energy was pure, controlled chaos. One of the most legendary moments in television history happened because of Rickles. While guest hosting, he accidentally broke Johnny's cherished cigarette box. A few nights later, Johnny crashed the set of Rickles' sitcom, CPO Sharky, to exact his revenge.
It happened last night.
Who?
Don Rickles.
I did not see the
Don
show
Rickles
last
did it last night. He's taping across the hall.
Somebody broke my cigarette box. I just started the show. I picked my box up off my desk that I've had for 9 years. My box is broken. They told me you broke it on the show last night.
Well, I realize... But just keep me on your show. You mean so much to me. Can I...
No,
please.
No. Don't humble yourself.
Please, I want to be with you so bad.
Don't humble yourself, brother. I want something back. Okay, carry on.
Help me.
Carry on. Good seeing you. Johnny Carson. They know who I am.
The danger was half the fun. No one in the studio knew who Rickles would target next. Johnny would sit there with a grin, practically waiting for the next insult to be aimed at him. Don treated Johnny like an old friend, which meant showing him absolutely no mercy. He mocked Carson's clothes, his personal life, his haircut, nothing was off limits. Johnny respected him enough to let him say things that would have gotten anyone else banned from the show. Number 3, Rodney Dangerfield, the master of the one-liner. Nobody could match Rodney's pace. He delivered punchline after punchline, each one hitting harder than the last. His signature catchphrase, "I don't get no respect," became an instant classic, delivered with perfect timing every single time. Johnny absolutely loved Rodney. You could see Carson leaning back, almost counting the jokes, laughing harder as Rodney nervously tugged at his tie and wiped his brow.
Hey, my neighbor don't get no respect either, no respect at all. You kidding? No respect from anybody. I bought some rat poison. The girl asked me, should I wrap it up? You're gonna eat it here. I mean, the girls always gave me a hard time. I'm not a ladies' man, that's why. You kidding? I know I'm ugly. I stuck my head out the window, got arrested for mooning.
Rodney's entire persona was built on being the underdog. His wife, his kids, even his doctor didn't respect him. He sold that character so well that you couldn't help but laugh. These weren't really interviews, they were stand-up routines performed at the desk. Johnny would try to ask a serious follow-up question, and Rodney would just steamroll him with 5 more rapid-fire jokes. Carson never minded. He would just pound the desk and shake his head in amazement at the sheer speed of Rodney's mind. Number 4, Steve Martin, the wild and crazy genius. Steve brought a completely new flavor of comedy to the show. It was absurdist, intellectual, and incredibly silly all at the same time. He didn't just tell jokes, he created moments. Whether he was playing the banjo or performing magic tricks that intentionally failed, Johnny was fascinated by him. Carson loved comedians who brought something unique to the table, and Steve was unlike anyone else. He treated the audience like they were part of an inside joke. Behind the arrow through the head and the white suit, Johnny recognized a brilliant mind. Steve Martin deconstructed what it meant to be a comedian. One of his most famous bits, The Great Flydini, had Johnny in stitches without Steve saying a single word. It was physical comedy at its absolute peak. Johnny appreciated that Steve's act was smart enough to be silly. He recognized that it takes a genius to play the fool so perfectly. Number 5, Joan Rivers, the fearless queen of comedy. Before the feuds and the late-night wars, Joan was simply Johnny's favorite female guest. She was sharp, rapid-fire, and brutally honest. Her famous catchphrase, "Can we talk?" was the signal that she was about to say something everyone else was thinking but was too afraid to say. She brought a gossip-style energy that lit up the studio. Johnny saw her potential early on, eventually making her his permanent guest host. Joan's humor was self-deprecating but aggressive. She made fun of her life, her looks, and her marriage, which made the audience fall in love with her. Johnny loved her unpredictability. With Joan, there was always a sense of danger. She pushed the envelope of what was acceptable on TV at the time. They had an undeniable chemistry, like a brother and sister bickering, but with a deep underlying respect for the craft of comedy. Johnny saw Joan as a real comedian, not just a female comedian, and she rewarded that respect by being absolutely hilarious every time she sat down. Number 6, Jonathan Winters, the one-man improv machine. Winters was unique because he didn't need a script, he just needed a spark. He could create entire characters out of coffee cups, ashtrays, or anything sitting on Johnny's desk. Carson would let him run completely wild, sometimes deliberately handing him a random object just to see what insanity would follow. Then, Johnny would sit back and collapse laughing as Jonathan built an entire universe around a stapler. He would pick up a pencil and it would become a fishing rod, then he would become the fish, then the angry wife, all in real time with no plan. Johnny loved that chaos. The danger of live television was the appeal, anything could happen, and with Jonathan Winters, it usually did. He would get so deep into character that Johnny sometimes had to physically stop him to go to a commercial break, and even then, Winters would stay in character. He was fearless and unpredictable, exactly what made great television. Number 7, Bob Hope, the man who made the show. Bob was a comedy giant whose appearances were treated like major events. He brought razor-sharp timing honed over decades and perfectly crafted jokes delivered with effortless confidence. Bob Hope and Johnny Carson had a chemistry that felt like two professionals sparring for fun. Carson always lit up when Hope walked through the curtain, genuinely honored to trade jokes with a hero who could still crush a monologue after 50 years in show business. Hope never phoned it in. Even in his later years, when others slowed down, Bob would come on and deliver topical jokes and self-deprecating bits about his age with perfect precision. They would volley back and forth like a tennis match. Johnny would set up a joke, and Bob would spike it. The audience knew they were watching two masters at work. For Johnny, having Bob at the desk wasn't just hosting a guest, it was working with an idol who treated him as an equal. Number 8, Tim Conway, the master of the slow burn. In the high-pressure world of late-night television, where silence is usually the enemy, Tim Conway was the only guest brave enough to use it as a weapon. While other comedians felt the need to be loud and frantic, Tim had the confidence to do absolutely nothing. He would sit on the couch, unassuming and quiet, often looking like he had wandered into the studio by mistake. He was famous for his work on The Carol Burnett Show, where he made his co-stars break character, but on The Tonight Show, his target was Johnny Carson himself. Conway's genius lay in his patience. He would tell a rambling, nonsensical story, like his famous bit about Siamese elephants joined at the trunk, and he would drag it out with agonizingly slow precision. He didn't need props or costumes, he just needed his deadpan expression and that innocent, stammering voice. Johnny Carson, who was usually the one in control, would find himself completely helpless. There are classic clips where Johnny is literally wiping tears from his eyes, his head on the desk, begging Tim to stop because he couldn't breathe from laughing so hard. Conway never cracked a smile. He would just watch Johnny suffer with a look of mild confusion, which only made the audience laugh harder. He proved that comedy isn't always about the punchline, sometimes, it's about the torture of the setup. Tim Conway remains the gold standard for how to destroy a talk show host without raising your voice. Number 9, Richard Pryor, the fearless storyteller. Richard Pryor was more than just a comedian, he was a cultural force who changed the temperature of the room the moment he walked out. In the 1970s, television was often polished and safe, but Pryor brought a raw, electric reality that no one else dared to touch. He didn't just tell jokes, he performed one-man plays while sitting in the guest chair. With his incredible gift for mimicry, he could bring an entire scene to life, transforming into different characters, animals, or even objects with just a shift in his posture or voice. Johnny Carson recognized immediately that Richard was operating on a different level than everyone else. What made their segment so special was the trust Johnny placed in him. Carson knew that Pryor's comedy came from a place of deep personal pain and vulnerability. Whether Richard was talking about his childhood, his heart attack, or his battles with addiction, he found the humanity and the humor in the darkness. Johnny would often lean back, fold his arms, and just let Richard go, giving him the airtime to explore complex stories that other hosts would have cut short. It was a high-wire act without a net. The audience was mesmerized because it felt dangerous. You never knew what Richard was going to say next, but you knew it would be honest. He made Johnny laugh, but he also made him listen, creating some of the most compelling television in history. Number 10, the dynamic duo of disaster, Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. Hollywood has seen many friendships, but few were as destructive and hilarious as the bond between Burt and Dom. Burt Reynolds was the #1 box office star in the world, the epitome of cool, while Dom DeLuise was the chaotic, high-energy funny man. When they appeared on the show separately, they were great, but producers knew that booking them together was a declaration of war on the set. They had a chemistry that felt like two brothers left home alone, they were there to amuse each other, and the audience was just along for the ride. The script was useless. The planned questions were ignored. It was pure improvisation. Their most famous appearance is arguably the wildest moment in Tonight Show history, the legendary whipped cream fight. It began with Dom teasing Burt, escalated to egg smashing, and ended with all three men, including Johnny, drenched in shaving cream and water, rolling around on the studio floor in their expensive tuxedos. Johnny Carson, who usually prided himself on keeping a tight ship, would eventually just throw his hands up and surrender to the madness. He loved them because they broke down the wall between celebrity and fan. They weren't acting like movie stars, they were acting like kids in a sandbox. It was a reminder that at its heart, comedy is about playfulness, and nobody played harder or messier than Burt and Dom. Number 11, David Letterman, the cynical genius. Before David Letterman became the face of Late Show and a rival for the throne, he was Johnny Carson's favorite student. But Dave wasn't an imitator, he was an innovator. He brought a style of anti-comedy that was completely fresh at the time. He was sarcastic, self-deprecating, and openly cynical about the absurdity of show business. While other guests tried desperately to be liked, Letterman seemed comfortable being a little bit prickly. He would make jokes about how bad his own show was, or mock the concept of the interview itself. This dry wit resonated deeply with Johnny, who saw a younger version of his own sharp intellect in Dave. Their dynamic was fascinating to watch because it was a mentorship playing out in real time. Johnny would often play the straight man to Letterman's oddball energy, setting him up for jokes that only Dave could deliver. There was a visible layer of respect. Johnny knew that Dave was rewriting the rules of what a talk show could be. He trusted Letterman enough to make him the primary guest host, handing him the keys to the kingdom when he was away. Every time Dave sat in that chair, he was sharp, fast, and relentlessly funny, proving to the world, and to Johnny, that he was the future of late-night television. It was a relationship built on the shared understanding that nothing is sacred in comedy. Number 12, Sammy Davis Jr., the ultimate entertainer. In the history of show business, few people have possessed as much raw talent in one body as Sammy Davis Jr. He could sing like an angel, dance like a master, act, and play multiple instruments, but people often forget just how naturally funny he was. When Sammy walked onto the Tonight Show set, the coolness factor went through the roof. He brought a relaxed, Rat Pack energy that turned a stiff TV interview into a hangout session between two old friends. Unlike other stars who were terrified of the camera, Sammy treated the lens like his best friend. He and Johnny had an undeniable chemistry that was almost brotherly. Sammy could switch gears in a split second. One moment he would be having a serious, thoughtful conversation about civil rights or the industry, and the next, he would launch into a hilarious impression or a bit of physical comedy that had Johnny doubling over. He was a master of reaction. Sometimes, just the way he looked at Johnny after a bad joke was funnier than the joke itself. Sammy didn't need a script spotlight. He proved that you could be the most talented man in the world and still be the silliest guy in the room. Watching him was watching pure joy. Number 13, Bob Newhart, the undisputed king of deadpan. In the flashy, high-volume world of 1970s and 80s television, where comedians usually felt the need to scream to get attention, Bob Newhart was a quiet revolution. He walked onto the stage looking less like a comedy superstar and more like a nervous accountant who had accidentally wandered into the studio looking for a restroom. This unassuming persona was his greatest weapon. Bob understood the power of silence better than anyone in the history of the medium. He didn't chase the audience for laughs, he patiently waited for them to come to him. He mastered the art of the micropause, staring blankly into space for just a second or two longer than comfortable, letting the tension build until the silence itself became hilarious. Johnny Carson, who was a student of comedy mechanics, had a profound intellectual respect for Bob. He recognized that Newhart's act required a level of precision that was incredibly difficult to execute. His signature routine, the one-sided telephone conversation, remains a masterclass in writing and performance. Bob would hold a prop phone to his ear and carry on a dialogue with absolutely nobody. Yet, through his stammering responses, his confused pauses, and his subtle facial tics, the audience could perfectly imagine exactly what the insane person on the other end of the line was saying. It was a magic trick of the mind that required the audience to participate in the joke. Johnny would often sit back with a look of pure delight, watching Bob weave these intricate, absurd scenarios out of thin air without ever raising his voice. Newhart proved that you didn't need to be manic, sweat through your suit, or use shock value to own the room, you just needed to be smarter than everyone else. He was the calm eye of the comedy storm, and for Johnny, he was a breath of fresh air. Number 14, Mel Brooks, the unstoppable hurricane of comedy. If Bob Newhart was a gentle breeze, Mel Brooks was a Category 5 natural disaster. When Mel was announced as a guest, the producers probably warned the cameramen to widen their shots because Mel Brooks could not be contained by a single chair. He didn't just enter the stage, he invaded it with the force of a conquering army. A legendary writer, director, and performer, Mel brought a vaudevillian energy that harked back to the old days of show business. He was loud, physical, theatrical, and completely impossible to ignore. From the moment he sat down, or rather, jumped around, he treated the desk, the curtains, and even Johnny himself as props in his own personal movie. What made Mel's appearances so iconic was his absolute refusal to stick to a script. He was the master of improvised insanity. Johnny might try to ask a simple, standard interview question like, "How is the new movie?" and Mel would launch into a 5-minute operatic performance, singing improvised songs, speaking in 3 different accents, and physically climbing over the furniture to make a point. Johnny Carson often looked like a man trying to survive a tidal wave, laughing helplessly, wiping tears from his eyes, and simply trying to hold on while Mel Brooks destroyed the format of the show around him. There was no off switch with Mel. Whether he was promoting a project or just stopping by to say hello, he gave 100% intensity every single second. He broke every rule of talk show etiquette, interrupting the host, shouting at the band, and hugging the guests, and Johnny loved him for it. Mel Brooks was a living reminder that comedy is supposed to be big, bold, dangerous, and completely unapologetic. Number 15, Harvey Korman, the master of losing control. Harvey Korman holds a very special place in comedy history. He was a classically trained actor and a brilliant sketch comedian, famous for his work on The Carol Burnett Show, but his true superpower was his vulnerability. In a profession where keeping it together and staying professional is usually the goal, Harvey made falling apart an art form. He was the absolute best at corpsing, the theatrical term for breaking character and laughing during a scene. On The Tonight Show, he brought that same infectious inability to stay composed to the interview chair. He would start telling a story, usually something self-deprecating, and before he could even reach the punchline, he would begin to giggle. That giggle would turn into a laugh, and soon, Harvey would be burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking, completely unable to finish his sentence. This created a magnificent feedback loop of joy. The audience would see Harvey laughing at himself, which made them laugh. Then Johnny, seeing Harvey in distress, would start laughing at Harvey, and suddenly the entire studio was in hysterics over absolutely nothing. It was a kind of meta-comedy where the breakdown was the joke. Johnny secretly encouraged it. He knew exactly which buttons to push and what faces to make to get Harvey to crack. Watching a seasoned professional lose control is one of the funniest things in the world because it feels like a shared secret, like laughing in church when you're not supposed to. Harvey Korman proved that you don't always need a perfect punchline or a rehearsed bit. Sometimes, you just need to be human, unguarded, and willing to laugh until it hurts. He made the show feel like a party among friends. These legends didn't just visit the show, they made television history. Who was your absolute favorite guest? Let us know in the comments. For more stories from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.